In the last video, we were discussing phase metering, ways that we can visually see what's happening with our phase in our mixers. And we're talking about our vector scope here in the middle and our correlation meter on the right. We were using this pigments preset to demonstrate what happens with phase. And I think that's a common thing with presets. We were talking about that they're quite often designed to be used in isolation and demonstrate what a synth can do rather than something that's useful in a mixdown. So in this video, we're going to look at some ways that we can minimize any sort of out of phase information that's happening and things going into these left and right segments and things dipping down in here too frequently. So we saw last time that if we turn our chorus off, most of the information goes on here, but I want to keep that chorus on because I like the sound of it, and I do want some of that stereo width and depth to happen. Otherwise, my mix is going to be boring. So what we can do is something that's called mid-side EQing. You might already be familiar with this, and you might have maybe seen it in an EQ, but maybe not known what it is and just sort of not used it. So mid-side EQing is a way that we can EQ the mid or the middle and the side information separately. Now, don't get this mixed up with mono and stereo. Yes, they have the same letter of the same first letter of the word, and they are similar concepts, but they're not exactly the same. Okay, so what the mid is, you could call mid the sum, all right? So it's the sum of the left and right channels together, all right? So it's not necessarily mono, but it's what happens when we collapse something to mono is that actually the left and right channels are summed together and converted into a signal that's just straight down the middle. Okay, so that's what happens with our mid. With the side is actually the difference between the left and right channels. Okay, so it's the left minus the right channel and the information that's left over. Okay, so it's not necessarily mono and stereo, but it's similar. Okay, all right, so I've got Pro Q3 loaded up here. I really love this plugin for my mid-side processing. This is a really good tool for not just eliminating phase problems, but also for just making your mixes more focused and tighter. Okay, so we need to engage firstly our mid and side modes. Now, Pro Q2, you used to have to do this down here, but with Pro Q3, you can actually, each node that you have, if I add more nodes, I can specify in that node whether it's mid, side, stereo, right, left, etc. Whereas previously in Pro Q2, I used to have to click around down here somewhere and engage the mid-side mode in the EQ. But I can have separate information for each node now, which is really cool. So let's get rid of these other nodes here. All right, so what I want to do is I want the information down here below, let's say around about 300, 400-ish hertz, but you can go lower if you want to. You can go higher if you want to. I just like around about 300 or so to be my cutoff point. So everything below that point, I want to be in my mid. All right, I don't want any side information down here. So I can do that by selecting side mode and selecting low cut. I like around a 24 dB filter for that. Okay, so what's going to happen is anything below my cutoff frequency is going to be just the mid. All right, it's going to be just the sum of the signals down here, of the left and right signals down here. And yes, that is actually going to cause a bit of, because we've already got this sort of phase thing happening in the left and right here, it's actually going to cause a bit of attenuation by summing that there, but we can counteract that in a way in a sec that I'll show you. Okay, so let's have a listen already and have a look on our vector scope, what's happened just by doing that. So you might notice that as I got to around about here, maybe about 150 to about 200 hertz, we started getting that out of phase issue. So a lot of our phasing problems in this sound weren't actually occurring up this top end here, but actually happening down in this lower section here. And that is sort of typical of these sort of sounds where the lower end is the thing that's got this freaky phase business happening where our weight of our sounds is, and that's why our mixes are sounding really thin, or a lot of the power is being taken away in the club because either our mix or the sound that we're looking for has lost a lot of energy, particularly in the lower end there. We've already seen that we can minimize a lot of those phase issues just by mid-side EQing, just with a simple high pass with our side information here. But we can also make up for any of our lost bottom end here, because I'll show you what this actually does. Let me just turn this node off for a sec. So if I play my sound back and we've got our information happening over here once again, let's have a look at this here. So just have a look. This is a different Pro Q3. I'm just using this strictly as a, turn that off, strictly as a frequency analyzer. Watch what happens particularly around here when I sum that to mono. Okay, this area here from around about, up from here and up to about 200 hertz or so, lost a little bit of volume. All right, and that's that attenuation that I was talking about. It might not be much, but if it's a sound that requires that bottom end to give your mix weight, then it's going to drop out, and it's not going to be as weighty when that gets summed to mono. So a simple fix for that is that you can add another node, just add a low shelf and change that to mid, so it's just the mid that we're affecting here, even though down here that's all we're affecting anyway. And I'll just push that up just a couple of dB. So you can see here, let me just pull that away. You can see here, the process signal is the really bold bit, and then we've got that transparent thing in the background, which is the original signal coming in. The difference between those two is less now. If I pull that back, see, that was a bit of a difference there, but if I pull that back up again, okay, so I've compensated for the summing down here by just pushing that up a bit. All right, so that's a bit about mid-side EQing. You can go way deeper on that if you want to, but that's just a way that you can use mid-side EQing, a simple trick that you can use to avoid any phasing issues that you have, particularly in the bottom end of your sound. And that'll enable your tracks to still be wide when you play them on a stereo system and still sound great and still have a lot of width and depth to them, but will still sound great in the club and still be able to transfer to a mono system. So I hope you enjoy that, and I will see you over in the next video.